Go ahead and tell me I was cruel, but answer one question first. How many years should a wife wait for her own husband to make her feel wanted? Daniel paid bills, repaired broken things, and believed that was the same as romance. Matteo remembered flowers, gifts, dinners, and every small detail Daniel ignored. So when Daniel carried Matteo's bouquet into our living room, I decided it was finally time to teach my husband what a real man looked like. Daniel only checked the card, folded it once, and gave me that quiet smile I had always mistaken for surrender. My name is Serena Bell. I am 34, and I work as an event marketing manager, so of course I know what real effort looks like. Every week I watch men choose flowers, reserve beautiful rooms, and plan small surprises for women they love. Daniel believed paying the bills was enough, and I believed someone needed to show him that it was not. When he went quiet, he always gave me the same small smile, as if silence could protect him from the truth. I was certain that one day he would finally understand what kind of husband he had become. Daniel and I had been together for 9 years and married for 6, and our marriage had not started badly. During our first years together, every Friday evening belonged to us. He would collect me after work and drive to a small diner near the river, the kind of place with cracked red seats and sugar packets that always stuck to the table. We ordered one slice of chocolate cake and divided it between us. Daniel always gave me the larger half, even when he pretended the pieces were equal. That was how he loved me then. Quietly, yes, but with attention. When my mother became ill, he drove her to every hospital appointment. He slept in waiting rooms and brought coffee before anyone asked. I knew he could care for someone. That was exactly why his change after marriage bothered me so much. Once we moved into the house he had inherited from his mother, Daniel became a different man. The house needed work, and he treated every broken pipe or damaged wall like a personal mission. Friday dinners became less frequent. Then they disappeared. He stopped buying flowers because he said they died too quickly. He stopped planning weekends because he was always repairing something. On our 5th anniversary, he came home with a new kitchen faucet and expected me to admire it. I asked whether he understood that I was his wife, not another part of the house. He said the old faucet had been leaking for weeks and that replacing it saved us money. That was Daniel. I asked for romance and he answered with a receipt. At work, romance was everywhere. My desk was usually covered with sample invitations, ribbons, perfume cards, and photographs of couples smiling under lights I had chosen. I could create a perfect proposal for strangers in 3 days, yet my own husband could not remember the last time he had brought me a bouquet. One afternoon, Chloe found me removing white roses from a display after a client changed the colour scheme. She asked why I did not take them home. I told her Daniel would probably complain about pollen on the table. Chloe laughed and said a woman who designed romantic events deserved a husband who could at least visit a florist. I placed the roses in a glass vase beside my computer instead. They looked better at the office anyway. That evening, I found Daniel in the living room with paint samples spread across the floor. He asked why I had been coming home later. His voice was soft, almost careful. I told him work was busy. He looked at my empty hands and asked whether I had eaten. That irritated me more than it should have. He could ask about food, fuel, or whether my tires needed air, but not whether I was happy. I asked him when he had last planned something for us. Daniel said he thought we were planning the house together. I told him a roof was not a date and a repaired bathroom was not affection. He went quiet. Then came that small smile. I had seen it many times. To me, it meant he had no real answer. He picked up a hardware receipt, folded it carefully, and placed it inside a small black notebook beside him. He had started carrying that notebook everywhere during the previous month. I assumed he was tracking renovation costs because numbers had always been easier for him than feelings. Daniel asked what had changed between us. I told him nothing had changed except that I had stopped pretending his lack of effort was normal. He reminded me about the hospital visits, the diner, and the first years in the house. I said memories did not excuse the man he had become. After that conversation, he cancelled his plan to paint the hallway and sat alone near the window. I watched him for a moment, expecting him to apologize or suggest dinner. Instead, he opened the notebook again. 2 pages, 3 short lines. Then he closed it. The following Sunday, we had lunch with my parents and my sister Rachel. My mother complimented the new shelves Daniel had built. I said Daniel was excellent at caring for wood and terrible at caring for his wife. Rachel gave me a warning look, but my father laughed once before realizing I was serious. Daniel did not defend himself. He simply asked whether I wanted more coffee. I told everyone that this was exactly the problem. A real husband would notice that his wife needed affection before she had to announce it at a family table. On the drive home, Daniel asked why I needed other people to hear something I had already told him privately. I said perhaps public embarrassment would succeed where private conversations had failed. His hands remained steady on the steering wheel. That quietness annoyed me because it made every argument feel unfinished. At home, I placed a grocery store bouquet in the center of our dining table. I had bought it for myself. Daniel looked at the flowers, then at me, but said nothing. I told him not to worry. If he could not remember how to court his wife, eventually someone else would. He gave me the same calm smile and folded the flower receipt into his black notebook. 3 weeks after I bought those flowers for myself, my agency received a contract from a luxury car dealership. They wanted a private evening for their best customers, with soft lighting, live music, and tables that looked expensive without feeling formal. The sales manager assigned to work with me was Matteo Cruz. He was 36, confident, and always dressed as if someone might photograph him without warning. During our first planning meeting, he asked why I kept changing the roses in the entrance display. I told him most men did not understand that the wrong flowers could ruin an entire room. Matteo said he understood because details showed whether a person cared. It was a small comment, but Daniel had not spoken to me that way in years. Matteo noticed everything. He remembered that I took coffee without sugar. He noticed when I changed my earrings. After I mentioned that I liked white flowers more than red ones, he ordered white roses for the main event without asking me again. Daniel needed 3 reminders to buy toothpaste. Matteo remembered 1 sentence from a crowded meeting. Of course I noticed the difference. Chloe noticed it too. She began finding reasons to leave Matteo and me alone during site visits. She said Daniel had become too comfortable and that attention from another man might remind me of my value. I told her nothing serious was happening. Matteo was simply professional, and I was simply enjoying a conversation with someone who listened. That was how I explained it, even after Matteo began sending messages that had nothing to do with the event. He asked whether I had reached home safely. He sent photographs of restaurant tables and said one of them reminded him of my work. When I mentioned that Daniel had forgotten to make plans for another Friday night, Matteo asked how a man could live with a woman like me and stop trying. I read that message 4 times before placing my phone face down. At home, Daniel was replacing a loose cabinet door. He asked why I was smiling. I told him Chloe had sent me something funny. It was the first deliberate lie I told him, and it came out easily. Daniel watched me for a second, then gave me that small, calm smile. He did not challenge me. He wiped his hands, opened the black notebook, and wrote down the cost of the new hinge. At least that was what I assumed he wrote. 2 days later, a bouquet arrived at my office. White roses. Not the cheap kind from a grocery store, but a large arrangement with thick paper and a silver ribbon. The card only said that a woman who created beautiful evenings deserved one of her own. Chloe stood beside my desk and read it over my shoulder. She said Matteo understood romance better after 3 meetings than Daniel had after 6 years of marriage. I should have corrected her, but the words felt too accurate. I placed the bouquet where everyone could see it. When Daniel called that afternoon, I told him I would be late because the dealership had changed the guest list. In reality, Matteo had invited me to dinner after the final walkthrough. I told myself it was still work. We discussed the event for perhaps 20 minutes. After that, he asked about my marriage. I described Daniel as a man who believed fixing a roof counted as affection. Matteo said stability mattered, but a woman should not feel invisible inside a stable house. That sentence stayed with me. Daniel had never called me invisible. He had simply made me feel that way. Matteo ordered dessert without asking because he remembered what I had chosen during a client lunch the week before. When the waiter brought it, Matteo said some things should not require repeated instructions. I smiled because I understood exactly who he meant. I returned home after 10. Daniel was sitting in the living room with the lamp beside him and the black notebook resting on one knee. He asked whether the guest list usually required perfume and a restaurant receipt in my coat pocket. His voice remained quiet. Specific. That made it harder to dismiss. I told him the client had invited several people from the agency to dinner. He asked why Chloe had posted a photograph from her apartment during the same hour. I said he was becoming suspicious because he knew he had stopped giving me attention. Instead of answering his question, I made his failure the subject. Daniel said he was asking about one evening, not our whole marriage. I told him our whole marriage was the reason one evening with another person felt better than coming home. His face changed for a second. Not anger. Something smaller. Then the calm returned. He asked whether the man from the dealership was Matteo Cruz. Hearing the full name made me pause. I had only mentioned Matteo once at home, and I did not remember using his surname. Daniel said the dealership name had appeared on one of the event documents near my bag. That explanation was ordinary enough, so I accepted it. He knew buildings, invoices, and company names. Remembering a surname did not suddenly make him emotionally intelligent. The next morning, Daniel asked whether I wanted to restart our Friday dinners. He suggested the old diner near the river. For 1 second, the offer almost reached me. Then I remembered Matteo's roses standing on my desk. Daniel was trying only because another man had done what he should have done without being pushed. I told him I did not want pity dates. He said it was not pity. I said real effort should come before a wife becomes tired of asking. Daniel did not argue. He gave me the same small smile, folded a note into his black notebook, and left for work. That afternoon, I moved Matteo's bouquet closer to the office entrance. When co-workers asked who had sent it, I stopped calling him a client. I said it came from a man who still knew how to treat a woman. The dealership event ended on a Thursday, but Matteo did not stop messaging me. If anything, his attention became more personal once we no longer needed a professional excuse. He sent photographs of flowers and asked which arrangement suited me best. He offered dinners, small gifts, and reasons to stay away from home. Daniel continued repairing the house as if a better hallway or a quieter washing machine could solve what was missing between us. That difference became impossible for me to ignore. One man watched what I wanted. The other waited for me to provide instructions. Chloe still listened when I described Matteo, though her excitement had started to fade. At first, she had asked for every detail. Now she usually smiled, checked her phone, and reminded me that Daniel might react badly if I pushed too far. I told her Daniel did not react to anything. That was his problem. He went silent, gave me that small smile, and acted as though waiting long enough would make every difficult conversation disappear. I had spent years trying to make him understand privately. My next step needed witnesses. My parents had not visited the house since Daniel finished the dining room, so I invited them for Saturday dinner. Rachel came too, and Chloe agreed to stop by after work. I told Daniel it would be a simple family evening. He asked why Chloe was attending a family dinner, and I said she had helped me choose the new table decorations. He looked at the fresh white cloth, the polished glasses, and the empty space in the center of the table. Then he gave me the same quiet smile. He did not ask another question. Matteo and I had planned the delivery 2 days earlier. I told him I wanted flowers large enough to fill the center of the room. He asked whether I wanted the card to be discreet. I said there was no point sending flowers if the person who needed the lesson could pretend not to understand them. Matteo liked that answer. He said some men only respected what they were afraid to lose. That was exactly what I wanted Daniel to feel. Not pain, pressure. There was a difference, at least to me. Dinner began calmly. My mother praised the changes Daniel had made to the house while my father asked about the heating system. Rachel helped carry plates from the kitchen. Chloe arrived late and sat beside me with her coat still around her shoulders. Daniel spoke when someone asked him a question, but otherwise he remained quiet. I watched him pour water, clear plates, and check the oven. He looked useful, dependable, completely unaware that being useful was not the same as being wanted. At 7:20, the doorbell rang. I knew the delivery time because Matteo had sent me a message 5 minutes earlier. My hands were resting on the table, so I asked Daniel to answer it. He looked toward the hallway, then at me. For a second, I thought he understood, but he only stood and walked to the door. The room stayed quiet while we heard him speaking to the courier. A moment later, Daniel returned carrying a bouquet so large that he had to hold it with both arms. White roses filled the center, surrounded by red ones and dark green leaves. A silver ribbon hung across his wrist. The arrangement covered part of his chest, making him look like a delivery worker in his own home. Chloe's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother lowered her fork. Rachel looked from the flowers to me and asked what I had done. Daniel placed the bouquet in the empty space at the center of the table. He did it carefully. Not one glass moved. Then he looked at the card attached to the ribbon. I reached for the bouquet and said it was exactly what a woman deserved after years of being ignored. Daniel asked who had sent it. His voice was level. I told him it came from a man who understood that marriage did not turn a woman into furniture. My father stopped chewing. My mother asked whether I was speaking about the dealership manager. I said his name was Matteo and that he knew how to make a woman feel valued. Nobody interrupted me, so I continued. I told Daniel to look at the flowers and learn something. Real men did not wait until their wives begged for attention. Real men bought gifts, planned evenings, and made women feel desired. Daniel had become a doormat who could repair a sink but could not court the woman sleeping beside him. Rachel told me to stop. I said stopping was what had created the problem. Every time Daniel failed me, everyone expected me to smile because he was reliable. Reliability did not make him a good husband. Then I gave him the sentence I had prepared all week. I told him not to worry because he would probably be replaced soon. The words landed harder than I expected. My father placed his fork beside his plate. My mother stared at the tablecloth. Chloe looked down at her phone, though the screen was dark. Daniel did not raise his voice. He removed the card from the ribbon and read it slowly. Matteo had written that I deserved to receive flowers from a man who recognized my value. Daniel folded the card once, then again. He opened the black notebook he had left near the window and placed the card between 2 pages. I almost laughed. Even while being humiliated, he was still organizing pieces of paper. That was Daniel's answer to everything. A notebook, a receipt, silence. He looked at me and gave me the calm smile I knew so well. To me, it meant he had finally understood that he could not compete. Dinner ended within 15 minutes. My parents left without dessert. Rachel hugged Daniel near the door but walked past me without touching my shoulder. Chloe said she had an early morning and left before I could ask what she thought. When the house became quiet, Daniel returned to the dining room. The flowers stood between us, bright under the hanging light. He asked whether humiliating him in front of my family had made me feel more loved. I told him the evening was not about humiliation. It was about honesty. He said honesty usually began before another man started sending gifts. I reminded him that Matteo had not created the emptiness in our marriage. Daniel had. For a moment his face lost its calm. He looked tired rather than weak, but I refused to let that soften the point I had made. Daniel asked whether I wanted him to compete with Matteo. I said I wanted him to understand why he was losing. He closed the black notebook and carried it upstairs. The bouquet remained in the center of the table, larger than anything Daniel had ever brought me. I poured myself another drink and admired it. The lesson had finally been delivered, and Daniel had carried it through the front door himself. For the next 4 days, the bouquet remained in the center of our dining table. The white roses began turning brown around the edges, but I refused to throw them away. They proved something important. Matteo had listened after only a few months. Daniel had failed to listen for years. Each morning, Daniel walked past the flowers without commenting. He made coffee, checked the heating controls, and left for work with the black notebook inside his bag. At night, he returned and began sorting the house as if he had suddenly decided every drawer required attention. He labeled boxes in the garage. He separated old photographs from utility records. He asked whether the winter coats in the attic belonged to me or Rachel. I told him he was using cleaning as another excuse to avoid our marriage. Daniel said he wanted to know which things were mine. I laughed and reminded him that almost everything in the house belonged to both of us. He gave me that calm smile and wrote something in the notebook. Of course he did. Paper was easier than answering me. Matteo continued calling, but his messages became shorter. He still told me I deserved better, yet he stopped asking when I would be free. When I suggested spending Sunday together, he said the dealership had a difficult weekend ahead. I accepted that because successful men had demanding jobs. Daniel had used work as an excuse for years, but Matteo's work felt different. Matteo worked hard and still found time to send flowers. That was what mattered. Chloe became harder to reach as well. At the office, she stopped sitting beside me during lunch and began eating with the design team. When I asked whether something was wrong, she said the flower delivery had become more serious than she expected. I told her she had encouraged me from the beginning. Chloe said she had encouraged Daniel to make more effort, not me to shame him in front of my parents. I reminded her that nobody had defended me when Daniel made me feel invisible. She said nothing after that. 2 hours later, she moved our afternoon meeting into the main conference room instead of taking it at my desk. It was a small change, but I understood the message. She wanted distance without having to admit it. Rachel came to the house on Wednesday evening. She did not call first. Daniel opened the door and I heard them speaking quietly in the hallway before she entered the living room. Rachel carried a folder of old family photographs Daniel had found in the attic. I asked why he had involved her in sorting our belongings. She said Daniel had only asked whether some photographs belonged to our mother. Her answer sounded rehearsed, which made me suspicious. Rachel looked at the dying bouquet and asked why it was still there. I told her it was a reminder that women did not have to accept neglect forever. She said neglect was not the same as permission to be cruel. That word annoyed me. Cruelty was Daniel allowing years to pass without planning a single meaningful evening. Cruelty was watching me ask for affection and then repairing another wall. Rachel said Daniel had failed me emotionally, but I had wanted an audience when I punished him. I told her she had always respected practical men because our father was one. She could not understand what it was like to be married to someone who treated romance as an unnecessary expense. Rachel asked whether Matteo planned to build a real life with me. I said he had already shown more commitment than Daniel had. Her eyes moved toward the boxes near the hallway, then back to me. For 1 second, I followed her gaze. 6 boxes were stacked against the wall, each marked with a room and a short list. Bedroom, office, bathroom, personal. The labels were written in Daniel's careful block letters. A strange thought opened inside me. The boxes did not look like cleaning. They looked like preparation. Then Daniel entered carrying tea, and the thought disappeared under my irritation. He was probably trying to frighten me into behaving. That was all. Rachel left without hugging me. Daniel carried the old photographs into the living room and sat near the window. One picture remained in his hand. It showed us in the diner during our 2nd year together. My hair was shorter then. Daniel had chocolate icing on one finger because I had pushed the larger piece of cake toward him. He studied the photograph longer than necessary. When he asked whether any part of that life still mattered to me, His voice was not cold. It was tired. For a brief moment, I remembered Friday evenings, hospital waiting rooms, and the way he once warmed my side of the bed during winter. The memory made the room quieter. Then I looked at the dying flowers and remembered every anniversary he had treated like an ordinary day. I told him memories could not replace being desired. Daniel said he had loved me through actions because words and displays had never come naturally to him. I answered that love nobody could feel was useless. He could not deny that. His mouth tightened, and the small smile disappeared. That was the first time I saw simple sadness on his face without anger around it. I could have softened my voice. Instead, I told him Matteo made me feel like a woman, while Daniel made me feel like another responsibility attached to the house. Daniel placed the photograph inside the black notebook. He said the problem was no longer only what he had failed to give me. It was what I had learned to enjoy taking from him. I accused him of changing the subject because he could not compete with Matteo. Daniel replied that competition was not what I wanted. He said I wanted him to stand beneath someone else so I could finally feel above somebody. I told him he was trying to make himself the victim. Then I changed tactics. I sat beside him, lowered my voice, and said I was willing to be patient if he started proving that I mattered. I suggested he could plan dinners, buy flowers, and show me he was not ready to lose me. It sounded generous when I said it. Daniel asked whether Matteo would remain in my life while he completed this test. I told him Matteo was not the issue. Daniel's failures were. The calm smile returned, but there was nothing soft in it. He said he understood the arrangement I was offering. Then he stood, carried the last box from the hallway into the garage, and placed the black notebook on top of it. I assumed he was finally accepting that he needed to change. That night, I took a photograph of Matteo's bouquet and sent it to him with a message saying Daniel had learned nothing. Matteo replied almost 3 hours later with a single heart. I treated it like a promise. By Friday, I had stopped thinking of Matteo as an escape and started thinking of him as my future. I packed a small overnight bag and left it inside my car. There was no reason to move everything at once. Once Daniel understood that I had chosen a better man, he would eventually accept the rest. Matteo had become less available, but I blamed his work. 2 days, 3 short replies, no dinner. Successful men were busy, and I refused to punish him for ambition the way Daniel had punished me with routine. That evening, my parents came to return a serving dish. Rachel arrived with them. Daniel asked everyone to stay for coffee. I assumed he wanted witnesses because he planned to apologize. Instead, he sat at the end of the dining table with the black notebook beside him. The bouquet was still there. Most of the roses had collapsed against the vase. Daniel asked whether I was willing to end my relationship with Matteo and attend counseling with him. His voice was calm and clean. He did not beg. He admitted that he had stopped planning dates and had treated stability as if it could replace attention. He said he had withdrawn whenever I asked for more because practical problems were easier for him than emotional ones. That was the first time he stated it without defending himself. I told him he was correct. He had made me feel unwanted for years. He had remembered insurance payments while forgetting anniversaries. He had repaired every part of the house except the marriage inside it. Daniel did not argue because every word was true. Then he asked whether that truth gave me the right to humiliate him in front of my family and continue seeing another man. I said it gave me the right to choose a life where I was valued. My mother asked me to think carefully. Rachel said Matteo had not even offered me a home. I told them they were protecting Daniel because his silence made him look harmless. Then I reached into my bag and placed my phone on the table. I showed them Matteo's messages, photographs of the gifts, and the restaurant reservations. I said this was what effort looked like. Daniel had 6 years. Matteo needed only a few months. Daniel asked one final time whether I wanted to save the marriage. I told him counseling could not turn a weak man into a real one. Matteo had already replaced him in every way that mattered, and soon Daniel would be removed from the rest of my life too. My father stood and walked toward the window. Rachel looked at Daniel, not me. Daniel grew quieter. That made me bolder. I pointed toward the dead bouquet and told him not to worry about being replaced because it had already happened. A man who wanted me had sent flowers. The man who married me had watched them die. Daniel gave me the same small smile. Then he closed the black notebook and placed it on top of the nearest labeled box. He said he understood my decision and would now handle everything properly. No anger, no argument, just acceptance. I read that calm as surrender. Before leaving, I messaged Chloe and told her I had finally chosen Matteo. The message showed as delivered, but she did not answer. I carried my overnight bag to the front door and told my family I would return for the rest after Matteo and I decided where we wanted to live. My mother looked down. Rachel moved aside without stopping me. Daniel remained beside the table. The dying bouquet stood between us, and I still believed it proved I had won. Daniel asked me to return to the living room before I left. My parents and Rachel were still there, standing near the labeled boxes I had dismissed as cleaning. The dying bouquet remained on the table. Brown petals covered the white cloth. Daniel stood beside it, opened the black notebook, and gave me the same small smile I had always read as weakness. This time, nobody else mistook it. He removed the folded flower card first, then the restaurant receipt he had found in my coat, then the dates of my late evenings, the delivery records, and the notes he had written after every conversation I believed he had been too frightened to finish. He said he had known about Matteo for months. He had not stayed quiet because he was confused. He stayed quiet because he wanted me to make my choice without being able to blame pressure, suspicion, or one angry argument. My fingers tightened around the handle of my overnight bag. Daniel pointed toward the boxes and said every personal thing I owned had already been separated from the house. The coats in the attic, the photographs Rachel had identified, the bathroom products, my work files. Even the vase holding Matteo's flowers belonged to me, so he had packed its original box too. I told him the house was partly mine because we had lived there as husband and wife for 6 years. Daniel reminded me that he had inherited it before our marriage, and that I had signed an agreement confirming it remained his separate property. The renovation money I thought was our shared fortune had gone into the same house, while the joint account held far less than I had told Matteo. My father turned away from the window and said Daniel was not inventing anything. I had signed the papers at their dining table. I tried to explain that none of this changed why I had looked elsewhere. Daniel had neglected me. He had stopped dating me and treated emotional conversations like problems he could postpone. My father said that part was true. Then he added that loneliness explained why I wanted affection, not why I enjoyed humiliating the person who had once given it to me. The words did not land where I wanted them to. Nobody defended me. Daniel lifted the bouquet card again and said I had called these flowers proof that Matteo intended to replace him. He had called the dealership 2 days earlier using the number printed on the event paperwork I had left near my bag. Matteo had confirmed that the event contract was finished and that he wanted no further contact connected to the agency. Daniel had not threatened him. He had only asked one question, whether Matteo intended to offer me a permanent home. Matteo had ended the call. Daniel looked at the dead roses and said they were goodbye flowers. Matteo's goodbye to me. Now Daniel's too. He placed a formal move-out notice beside the boxes, and the divorce petition would be filed the following morning. That was the only paper he explained. Everything else was already visible. My mother did not offer her guest room. Rachel said I had announced that Matteo was ready to build a life with me, so I should go to him. I drove to his apartment with my overnight bag and 2 suitcases Daniel loaded into my car without touching my hand. A woman I had never seen opened Matteo's door. She wore his shirt and asked who I was. Matteo came into the hallway but stayed behind her. He said our relationship had never been permanent. The flowers had been his final gift, because he had already decided to end things. He had found someone else who wanted the same kind of life he wanted. When I asked why he had continued sending messages, he said, attention was not a promise. I spent that night in a 24-hour cafe with my luggage beside the table. My account could not support the apartment I wanted. Chloe stopped replying and began sitting with another team at lunch. Matteo blocked my number before morning. At work, people stopped asking about the roses after they learned why I no longer lived in the house shown across my social pages. A week later, I rented a room in a budget motel while searching for something cheaper. Daniel had failed me as a husband. He had stopped courting me, and his silence had made the marriage colder each year. That remained true. But I had not searched for affection alone. I had searched for someone who would help me prove Daniel was beneath me. I believed being wanted by two men made me impossible to abandon. It only gave me 2 doors to stand outside. The bouquet was left in a trash container beside Daniel's porch, with Matteo's folded cards still hidden among the dead flowers. The only flowers 2 men ever gave me together were the ones neither man wanted me to keep.